In all my hours of Payday challenge running, only one rule set ever truly broke me. Not once, but twice. Payday 2 without shooting a bullet is infamous on this channel, not only for all the people asking why I didn't just use a weapon that doesn't shoot bullets, like true pedants, but also for being the first insurmountable challenge that inspired this entire series. Now, several years on, I feel ready to face my white whale once again. Hardened by having to endure the torture of the Payday 3 update cycle, my calloused hands are prepared to go again, and this time finally climb the mountain that is Panic Room. Except I've been haunted by this failure for too long to just go through the no-shooting motions once more. I feel the need to truly humiliate this challenge by stubbornly upping the ante. So today, we won't be finding out if it's possible to beat Payday 2 without shooting, we already know it should be. No, this is Payday 2 with only throwables. As I've said before, challenge runs in general massively benefit from simplicity, not only for the audience but also for the runner. The tighter and more limiting a rule set, the more innovative you need to get in your gameplay, and the less wiggle room you have to avoid facing the intrinsic challenge head on. That is why this is the shortest, yet most restrictive rule set I've ever created. Simply put, I must beat the entire Payday 2 campaign whilst only picking up kills with weapons in the throwable slot. Grenades, molotovs, knives, and most importantly, explosive snowballs will make up the entirety of my lethal arsenal, losing access to that powerful melee sociopath build I once ran. Melee damage is allowed if it's specifically used to non-lethally convert jokers, but again, if I accidentally pick up a kill with it, or the saw for that matter, it's an instant restart. Otherwise, the rule set is exactly the same as what you're used to if you're a veteran viewer. We want to complete every heist in Payday 2's campaign mode, starting out with a fresh level 0 account, without access to grinding a heist for XP or cash. Tangible mods are limited to only Vanilla HUD Plus for this challenge, whilst all heists will be attempted on the highest available difficulty, capping at Death Wish as I level up, so Mayhem from level 0 to 79 and Death Wish up to the finale. Lifelines are back with a vengeance as I can see them being necessary, especially on those dreaded sniper missions. Again, we have the usual drop difficulty, crew AI, and rule breaker lifelines. I'll explain more about how these function if we need to use them later on, but essentially they're a way to get further into this sort of challenge if I hit a singular roadblock. With that all said, it's time to rebind my left mouse button and get my pitching arm warmed up for the deadliest snowball fight the Washington PD have ever partaken in. In all seriousness, this is the grandest undertaking the series has ever seen, so strap in, drink in the agony, and if you enjoy, drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more, it's much appreciated. Sending Yelwant back to square one for what I anticipate will be one of the longest lives he's ever lived, immediately my plans were in disarray. You see, the reason I recorded this challenge between December and January is that the winter event is active during those months. The most important addition they bring to this run is of course the Snowball Throwable, the only self-replenishing throwable and a massive game changer on any sniper heavy mission. Except for some reason, this year new accounts didn't get access to the snowballs. So Yelwonk of old could access them, as I believe this save file is from around when I recorded the heavy challenge, but newly born Yelwonk of Christmas 2024 is completely ballless. So the entire purpose of waiting until the right season to record this is now out of the window. Instead, I need to install the mod, Timeless Event Items, to gain permanent access to the snowballs, which I could have done back in June if I wanted to. The only other thing that's tangibly changed since then is the addition of the Ordnance bag deployable. This extremely niche piece of equipment allows you to fully replenish your throwable store with every usage. Sadly, it's unaffected by skills, but on its own it can turn, say, 10 shuriken into a total of 50. Not a bad upgrade for when I'm forced to switch over to those finite resources, but unlikely to be something I focus on, especially in the early game. That said, live on stream this time we kick things off with a car shop opener to reach level 10 and move into the more restrictive part of the run. The snowball is fortunately available at level 1 and already it's opening up plays that wouldn't be possible otherwise, as I landed a perfect 2 for 1 on the upper floor of the Toyota dealership, meaning their pages were perfectly synced to answer both consecutively to keep the stealth dream alive. The silliness continued when I stumbled into this guard and in forcing him to surrender gave him the power to defy gravity. Despite a sieve eventually finding my levitating friend, it was much too late as the C4 was already planted, giving me more than enough time to drive a Falcogini to the escape on the first attempt. That's some streamer luck if ever I've seen the phenomenon in action. This gave me enough XP to start unlocking this run's perk deck of choice, Anarchist, as well as set up an early basic build with shotproof and Joker skills. Anarchist is a top tier perk deck to be sure, and crucially it's one of the few top tiers that doesn't commandeer your throwable slot. Unfortunately, it does suffer from a slightly weak early game, so that's going to be something to keep an eye on whilst leveling up. First on the docket is Bank Heist Cash. I set up for Loud on this one, mostly just because it's more entertaining to fight cops instead of just staring at a drill, although Attempt 1 proved this call to be foolhardy. The snowball is powerful due to its AoE damage, knockdown potential, and spammability, but at this stage it's weak as hell, hitting for a context-sensitive 240 damage, which just isn't enough to take out most specials, let alone dozers, as I found myself cop-blocked and taken down with the aid of a taser after trying to hide out in the security room. On Attempt 2, I fully intended to go Loud again, only stealthing as far as possible to get a head start on the assault, but then the security just sort of pathed in my favour, handing themselves over to me, and with the easier vault spawn location, a stealth clear sort of manifested itself. Honestly, given the innate challenge of this run, I'm not sure I should be pandering to Twitch chat's attention span on this one, as this sort of easy clear won't always be on the cards. Case in point, on Jewelry Store up next, a misplaced FA case or an early heist exit just at the hands of the Washington PD beat cops. Again, the adaptation was just to prioritise stealth, as Civ control is easier than ever on this run. You see, I have literally no need for money outside of the occasional asset purchase. Throwables are free, I've already bought a saw, and don't need to worry about any other weapons in this build, so cleaner costs are really a drop in the ocean for this challenge. All I'm saying is, if a single snowball's doing you in, you probably weren't long for this world anyway. An easy, if rather bloody, second time clear. Diamond Store is another heist I'd much rather breeze through in stealth if possible, although I have found one glaring issue with the all-important snowballs. Best not to throw these things in the vicinity of any glass. Attempt 2 hit me with the classic no side door RNG, which is an instant restart, whilst 3 was the one, switching over to Shuriken to avoid any more unwanted acts of vandalism, and taking out the 4 guards on this heist out of sight, before also sending a fair few civs to the Shadow Realm for good measure. While stealth has worked out brilliantly so far, my breaking point on that front is always go bank. I hate solo stealthing this RNG fest, so instead we nut up. The build's fairly straightforward, utility skills and jokers, plus low blow for the all-important crits that make the snowball's damage marginally more redeemable. I'm running the lightweight ballistic vest at this stage too, as I can't just rely on armor gating with the suit, especially up against the dreaded snipers of Go Bank. Surprisingly, it wasn't them who put an early end to Attempt 1. Instead, the rare turret spawn simply placed too much pressure on me inside the bank, and I still don't have the raw survivability built in to survive. On Attempt 2, I got lucky in grabbing an all-powerful Bronco cop early, who really can do some damage to his ex-colleagues, giving me a little more room to breathe whilst waiting out the initial drilling section. Again, I pivoted off the snowballs for now, using the deadly damage over time shuriken instead. Whilst these things aren't great for taking jokers, they're probably the best all-round self-replenishing throwable I currently have access to, one-shotting most swats outside of dozers with some lucky crits. I got incredibly fortunate with the cage pickup spawning on the main road, meaning after soaring into the deposit boxes and grabbing some cash, we were already on a timer to escape this one without too much resistance from the overwatching snipers. It got a little intense right before the pickup, but the assault fade couldn't have come at a better moment, allowing me to slip out to the sewers almost uncontested, beyond a couple of sniper shots that mercifully don't do enough damage to my reduced health pool yet. Also, good job I remembered to bring a bag of cash, otherwise this perfect RNG go bank would have just gone to waste. Looking at it up to this point, pretty much a dream start to a tricky to navigate early game, as I move on now to the transport heist. Crossroads first, where I struggled to secure a joker early on, meaning this dozer had nothing distracting him from ismering me into oblivion. Attempt 2 showcase why Payday 2 snipers probably aren't the perfect blueprint for Payday 3, as this one domed me the second I turned a corner with literally no recourse. On the plus side, he didn't repeat that feat on Attempt 3 from halfway across the map as I secured the final bags. I'll take that mercy in exchange for the first doming of the run. Moving on to the harbour next, as much as I was getting to grips with the throwing arc of the snowball, enough to keep the sniper population at bay most of the time, it does take a few lobs to get your eye in, and sometimes that's long enough for them to return fire, which was deadly here from 1/4 armour and 3/4 health. Pretty damn punishing. These boys have already set themselves up as the nemesis of this run in the prologue though, so nothing about this eternal battle is a surprise. One way I'm adapting is to just leave them alone when their spawn doesn't cover a specifically crucial portion of the map, allowing me to move most of the heavy gold loot freely to the escape before clearing a final path to victory. Alas, if only it were that simple, as the tricky car park escape is thrust on me next. As anticipated, having to lug 5 bags of gold up an entire multi-story car park isn't my idea of a good time, especially when time is of the essence with a tight point of no return. The saw was the real hero here though, quickly opening up a much faster and safer path up to the rooftop, where escape was pretty much guaranteed. Little did we know at the time, this was just a case of expediting my suffering, as now begins the trial of the transport train heist. A massive early game roadblock made always doable by its stealth component, but extra frustrating to attempt as a result. Unsuccessful tries on this heist can run you upwards of 20 to 30 minutes, as its challenge is well balanced throughout, meaning you never know when a promising foray can be cut short in an instant. Sometimes at the hands of the marshals, who were now spawning in on longer heists, sometimes as a result of my own fragility, as Anarchist really doesn't have much of that top tier identity until you unlock its final perk, Lust for Life, or sometimes it's just the usual suspects, the snipers, taking you out from the next postcode. It's extra crushing when you remember your best weapon up against their high caliber rifles is a little powder snow that's a nightmare to aim over longer distances. After an hour had already passed and the 4th run was put on the ground unceremoniously at the hands of a sniper I literally couldn't see, the desperation kicked in and I switched over to stealth. Now, my policy in the past is to show you every single failed attempt, which I'm doing right now, but if you take a glance at the runtime remaining on this video, you might see that's not going to fly at the rate we're moving. For the sake of giving more time to the truly soul-crushing failures, I will be skipping over some less interesting stealth restarts, but they will of course be tallied amongst the other stats for you to laugh at come the end of the run. 4 sub 2 minute throws as I shook off the tilt were a depressing start to proceedings. 5 made it further as I was well set up to secure the turret parts and then move on to the ammo, but an unadvisable rush resulted in a classic detection chain reaction, leaving me in an unsalvageable situation and proving I'd been playing far too much notoriety recently. That kind of failure does something to a man, as I was starting to doubt my stealth and loud skills simultaneously. I badly needed a reset, which for me was to switch over to the throwing knife for a fresh new approach, before getting absolutely humbled by a single skulldozer, and then 2 minutes later a couple of basic shields, proving beyond all doubt to me that the original way I was playing was categorically correct. Yep, full mental reset. This time, instead of chasing after sniper kills, I simply let them be as they weren't covering the boat escape, giving me every chance of moving all 23 bags without getting obliterated in a single breath. Slowly but surely, torturously at times, I pressed on with only out-of-season snow for company, juggling the shells as best I could. With 2 more needed to clear this one, and a 5-hour stream now under my belt, a crit here on this cloaker who trapped me in the carriage might be the most important 30% roll of the entire run, as it saved me from certain death, allowing me to make a run for it and fling the final 2 bags from the bridge to the escape below, finally completing one of the toughest early heists. But little did I know, this was barely a speed bump in the grand scheme of Throwables only. On a less ominous note, Vlad's jobs are up next, acting as perfect confidence builders after the body shot that is Train Heist. 4 stores is first massively expedited by C4, which turns this heist into little more than a waiting game. The same is true for the escape that went with it, as I didn't need to secure extra loot and could simply wander out of this one after 2 minutes. With Iron Man now in my build, I was pretty comfortable switching back to the 2-piece suit for more pressure, which did a fat lot of good protecting me from this evasive security guard after I nutmegged him with a snowball. Honestly, these hitboxes are infinitely more precise than you'd reasonably expect. Attempt 2 featured a little less embarrassment at the hands of 40 HP cops, as I basically bunkered down in the weights room for everyone's favourite arm day, chucking hundreds of snowballs at the crowd outside until Bile finally arrived for the rescue. I'm genuinely uncertain if the cops showed up for Ukrainian job. Like, my HUD tells me there should be 24 on the map, but at no point did they bother to enter the jewelry store, so I was free to drill into the safe containing Vlad's revenge tiara and escape this one in just a matter of minutes. The same goes for White Xmas. So long as I always healed to full after eating any sniper lead, I was never in any danger of actually going down, as I was starting to find my snowball flinging range. If this was an RPG in the same vein as Skyrim, let me tell you, I'd have 100 in my one-handed at this point. Alas, the training arc and flurry of easy heists are through. It's meltdown time next, where despite switching over to the ICTV Anarchist setup I've used to clear this one in a challenge run previously, intending to tank my way through any sniper fire with it, I'd turn myself into a sitting duck for the waves of murky water units who swarm you at the start of the heist. These little peons put a swift end to runs 1, 2, and 3, as with the throwing knife I was wielding, it was a nightmare dealing enough, but not too much damage to convince one to fight for me. This in mind, on attempt 4, I instead aimed my knife at a barrel, dealing just enough damage to convince this merc's singed ass to fight for me, which opens up the floodgates for more converts down the line. Also, instead of bringing a knife to every dozer fight, I'd remembered my other damaging tool in this heist. I always had the power of forklift trucks on my side, which as per our usual rules are fair game to run people over with, as the alternative is playing the world's hardest slalom in everyone's least favourite driving game engine. Unfortunately, despite my forklift's lethality, it doesn't half leave you as an easy target for snipers, meaning despite having tanked up in preparation for this oncoming barrage, once that tough exterior is breached, my reduced health pool just doesn't stack up. On attempt 5, I made the adjustment, switching back to snowballs to make the initial ambush less stressful and to give me at least a chance versus snipers, even if it was a long shot. I'd love to just claim it was these smooth build shifts I'd made that turned Meltdown from a nightmare to a forklift ride in the park, but in all honesty, it's probably got more to do with the snipers not bothering to spawn in until I'd already reached the Longfellow. No idea how their spawn logic works, but they did me one hell of a solid by not peppering the long forklift drive. The Longfellow is slightly more agile, meaning despite their late arrival, I was able to drive it to the train and back without a bullet so much as grazing my cranium for once, another satisfying clear that might have had a little luck mixed in. But, fear not sniper enthusiasts, your boys don't stay down for long as they spawned in all the earlier into my first Aftershock attempt, wiping me straight off the map. On attempt 2, they waited a little longer to ruin my day, saving up the suspense until after the C4 arrived directly in their line of sight. I just couldn't thread the needle on this guy, so headed to take out the sniper on the other side of the bridge, but without the patience to wait out Anarchist's immunity, my fate was sealed. Once again, I pivoted to throwing knives, as the anti-sniper utility of the snowballs was just getting me killed when I tried to face them down. Heists like Aftershock also suit the knives much better, as we have allies early on who are great at helping take hostages. Run 3 didn't get going, but 4 did make it further as Vlad's men assisted in converting chokers. Alas, the sniper spawned at the perfect time to catch me out up on the open bridge, dropping me in the bat of an eyelid as I had switched back away from the ICTV. You can see the frustration starting to mount when my own misplays drew attempt 5 to an early halt. Again, I've got loads of resources in my back pocket, and I'm up to the final section of the heist, but instead of keeping near my jokers, left myself wide open to basic damage from all sides, which I can't armigate quickly enough due to the deliberate single-target nature of the throwing knife. Salting the wound even further, have you ever seen the snipers on this heist spawn a whopping 1 minute 20 seconds in? That's just brutal RNG, as I went down from a source of damage I couldn't even track down. The knife was properly put through its paces on attempt 7, going up against 2 early dozer spawns, but after dropping 1 easily enough, I was kicked in the teeth by Payday 2's janky geometry, as my knives were caught by this force field fire truck, and I was dropped to the ground by the dozer whose life it saved. Honestly, they've got my snowballs perfectly flying between cops' legs, but of course, the knife can be blocked by thin air. Once again, I'm ashamed to admit it, but that thing happened again on attempt 8. The snipers went on strike during the bag-moving section of the heist, and the other major threat, dozers, get absolutely demolished by crit knives. This merciful setup allowed me to reach the truck for the first time, unlocking the power of roadkill and a path towards victory. Instead of waiting by the escape, fearing getting overrun, or worse, sniped, I stayed towards the centre of the heist, which helped avoid cascading spawns. Once I knew Bar was close, I set up an FAK next to the truck, and escaped this one after another grueling couple of hours. It's very clear to me that I can't take any heist for granted within this rule set, which is why I fully prepared for stealing Xmas, bringing along C4 to speed through the objectives. This one might have been on world record pace at one stage, as my RNG of toy store, wine store and VR headset has to be up there with the best seats. By just 4 minutes, I was already setting up C4 on the roof, meaning the snipers only had one brief opportunity to halt my escape before I dropped the only one with vision and escaped downstairs to clear this one in excellent time. Nightclub, on the other hand, is quickly rising through my ranks of worst Payday 2 heists. Outside of the unique setting, there's not a lot to love, especially when you're losing 1v1s with the gangsters running the joint. Again, my mistake here was not fully committing to either stealth or loud, resulting in half-hearted attempts at both and plenty of embarrassing downs. After losing my knives in this doze's face, I was left defenseless for another sad takedown on attempt 3, whilst another switchback to snowballs couldn't even save me, either versus the gangsters or the actual cops. Where's brother's keeper when you need it? Again and again, as I shifted the focus to stealth, I was slipping up, and don't even have the time to show you all the rookie mistakes I was making. I'm not actually sure my ego will ever recover from this. After numerous instant restarts, I started getting somewhere, only to leave a body bag out in the open, miss my first 4 knives on the bloke who found it, before landing the 5th, which in perfect Payday style, triggered the 10% chance for his weapon firing death animation, blowing stealth and leaving me at the mercy of this skulldozer a couple of minutes later who shot me directly out of the air. I'd love to say this was as low as nightclub laders, but I still had time to fit in 4 more blown stealth attempts before I finally wrapped my head around one of the simplest and least involved heists in the game, still blowing my cover on the escape just for the avoidance of any doubt that I am, in fact, washed. And normally, such a slip-up wouldn't matter, but of course, here it did, as I was presented with a miserable escape just to further give my stats a good rinsing. The park escape throws a bunch of beat cops at you, which at kind of this build's kryptonite, especially without a joker to take some heat early on. Pretty self-explanatory, you either get deleted within the first minute of the heist, or you grab a hostage which completely turns the tables, enabling me to move the bags across the square, and towards the escape the 4th time of asking. Watch Dogs is a nice reprieve at this point as one of the game's few sniper-light heists. Sadly, instead the cops just blow up our van, one-shotting me on attempt 1. Again, the snowball switch-up was a necessity to handle the initial ambush, even if it was a weaker option once outside of the truck. Still, it did a good job of tripping the cops up on their way to the top of this now slippery staircase, allowing for an easy escape in the car. Despite a double dozer spawn at the docks on day 2, the boys and I actually managed to snowball one to death, giving me enough room to wait out the boat and escape this one without much incident. Firestarter next for another gangster-heavy day 1, which is the antithesis of what Anarchist wants to go up against. They tore through on both attempts 1 and 2, although the switch into feign death finally paid off in attempt 3 as I came back to life and got to moving the bags over to the burning fuel tanker that I set ablaze using, yes, the saw, which nearly backfired badly. Without the ability to easily convert any joker though, I was wide open and quickly found out that the SWATs could burst me just as well as any gangsters, surviving again thanks to feign death before finally taking a hostage and rebuilding towards a successful clear. Day 2 is a fair bit easier, especially with tools like the saw at my disposal, although in trying to take security hostage to save the heartache from day 1, I did find myself in cuffs on the first attempt. Second time around, this strategy actually worked, meaning I had low damage minions to roll into SWATs further down the line. This was necessary, as for some reason I decided now would be the perfect time to whip out the Javelin. This is the highest damage throwable in the game, but given its slow refire speed and limited capacity, it's hardly ideal. I lost all 3 inside a dozer without rolling a crit, while I managed to restart back at the van and eventually take him out. Still, without an easy way to destroy his faceplate, I can't see myself using these things again as they're too crit dependent. If only I could run both snowballs and javelins with some sort of jack-of-all-trades skill, then I'd actually have a weapon for most situations. Sadly, that's not possible, meaning I move on to day 3 with only knives again, wanting an option up against dozers that didn't rely on pure luck. This is just a basic bank heist though, at its core, making for an easy clear once I landed this cheeky throwing knife on the sniper covering my exit. Rats now, and for once, it seems as if all that cook-off practice is finally paying off, as day 1 was a first time clear. Snowballs could crowd control any cops that made it upstairs, and the one bulldozer the game spawned in just left the map without doing anything, making life a hell of a lot easier, as I simply moved straight onto day 2, which I completed peacefully, before running it down on day 3, surviving by a literal whisker, before clearing out the Mendozas, and with them, Hector's multi-day jobs. My first run at Big Oil was foiled by an electric fence, immediately blowing my cover, whilst I played sloppily on attempt 2, earning another quick restart. This bloke was too determined to burn the evidence to bother shooting at me on attempt 3, which not only saved stealth on this one, but also allowed me to secure all the intel before heading into day 2. Access to the saw massively simplifies the raid on the fission engines, meaning I only had a 2-minute battle keeping the power switched on, up against these much more objective-minded cops than they once were. Once inside the basement, I had to work quickly without a flashlight to locate the correct engine on my first attempt, and then simply stay alive for pickup. The engine part was easy, staying alive slightly less so, although I still had enough snow in the tank to turn this into a rare first time clear. Next up, I simply stealthed day 1 at framing frame to move things along quickly and avoid the ambush on day 2, meaning we're immediately confronted with the torturous nightmare of day 3. If you thought the cops were good at turning off the power on Big Oil, you ain't seen nothing yet. These guys are relentless from the get-go, meaning although I quickly located the server room with my saw, it was still an uphill struggle to make any progress before this skulldozer cut through my armor and ended attempt 1. Self-preservation was out the window as the cops' one desire at this stage was to get that power switch turned off no matter what. Progress was sluggish, sometimes you get no more than 10 seconds on the clock before once again everything's shut down, which makes it really hard to do anything other than tread water for most of this heist. Fortunately, whilst they're distracted by their one true goal in life, I'm in no real danger myself, as my knife-slinging skills have me feeling like the trickster, and after a grueling 15 minutes, was free to jump the balcony and escape this one without as much pain as anticipated. Election day is normally easy enough, as I just intentionally pick the wrong truck on day 1, and then get on to braking, but I picked the right truck. Oops, well, I might as well try stealthing it. No, not that way either. The reason I normally avoid plan B is it's bloody boring. An almost 7-minute hack on a heist with some of the worst spawns I've ever seen is not my idea of a good time. I could have honestly gone AFK with my buffed up jokers to defend me, as the only real difficulty comes from the escape. Yes, that is 3 lasers trained at my head with no safe way to take them out. Instead, I went for the YOLO play and yeah, that has to be the closest I've ever come to the taste of victory before eating asphalt. However, running it back with a pure stealth build instead of half-arsing it, I had ECMs this time that were just enough to cover my escape, completing the final hack whilst already in the van and ready to move on. There's a lesson to be learned here for me, which is to not go on tilt anytime something bad happens. Fortunately, nothing bad did happen on Big Bank, one of the final easy heists on this run. I got peppered on the roof by sniper fire, but at this stage, I'm so close to a full anarchist setup their mayhem damage is survivable. The crit knife build was quickly becoming my preferred way to play, giving me the best DPS I could really hope for within the confines of this silly rule set. It got a little touch and go as I tried to open up the elevator and make it down to the escape van, as this taser just wouldn't leave me alone, but after my invulnerability reset I was free to head back out and clear a path to victory. My main relief at this stage is that I didn't hit level 80, meaning the tricky Hotline Miami is still a mayhem heist for now. I was off to a quick start in attempt 1, but within a few seconds of the sniper spawning in, any of that initial promise was sent crashing to the floor. Evidently, sniper control was going to be the key to making it through this one, taking it slower on attempt 2 and making sure to arc dozens of snowballs to the opposing rooftops to hopefully clear the space necessary to keep progressing. Things get a lot easier once down the basement and out of their scopes, as me and the boys even pelted another 12,000 HP dozer to death. The final sprint to the DeLorean was a Hail Mary, as I believed it to be a lesser risk than standing out in the open chucking snow at my opponents, but this time I didn't get punished inches from victory. Day 2 is where things normally heat up though, as attempt 1 was cut down by just a pair of cloakers, who are usually a non-issue without the ability to use their takedown. Attempt 2 didn't even make it up to the penthouse as the Russians took me out, whilst attempt 3 made it further, getting the drill started, but never feeling in control up against the RNG dozer spawns that I simply didn't have enough DPS to wipe off the map. Again, the pivot was to switch to knives, as although I wouldn't be willing to waste them on snipers, having 4 dozers prowling the heist was a more surefire route to failure. This time, after making it up to the penthouse, I fully backed off, taking hostages and baiting the dozers down in an area with more space to scrap, clearing the upper floor and giving me the room to set up the drill to keep it chugging even in the fire. Additional grenade case assets on the staircase made this so much easier, allowing me to juggle a total of 12 knives throughout the heist, 3 of which I planted square between the commissar's eyes, calling Bile in for the rooftop pickup, heralding my graduation to level 80 and the wilderness of Deathwish, just in time for Houston Breakout, one of the most drawn out and punishing loud-only heists in the game. Hey, at least it was Christmas themed. I'm gonna be honest here, my chances of success on day 1 directly proportional to whether I managed to convert this 480 health cop during the opening. She's a force of nature as a Joker, with solid tankiness equivalent to an elite SWAT and the DPS of a Bronco cop. In the world of Jokermon, she's a damn legendary, carrying me through attempt 1 as far as the final corner, where I simply missed too many throwing knives, going down because of my own pathetic aim. On attempt 2 and 3, I missed out on the key joker, leaving me exposed to instant Bronco death once topside, and also failing at the hands of my queen herself. Again though, with her at my side, I was able to push much further, only dropping this time to the power of a beat cop with his sniper shotgun. A flurry of failed negotiations later, and once again we were up in the snow, but dropped just a couple of minutes into the heist. You see, the second necessity to push further on this run was claiming another joker to keep the heat off my DPS. If I couldn't manage that early on, the run was as good as dead in the water, as you can see on attempts 9 and 10 respectively. 11 met another cruel beat cop fate, as these guys have similar spike damage output to snipers, which is another of Payday 2's many quirks. A quick pivot back to feigned death enabled me to hobble my way slightly further into the heist, but honestly just made the entire event more traumatic, as it was clear I was now way out of my depth up on this difficulty. However, on attempt 14 of day 1 of this multi-day heist, everything seemed to fall into place. I secured my bodyguards, giving me fairly safe passage to the garage. A sniper gave me the scare of a lifetime, but feigned death dragged me by the scruff of my neck to the second stage of this heist. Even stranger, one of my jokers managed to phase his way through the garage door, meaning I still had him after the spawns reset, which is usually the number one issue at this stage in the heist. The school dozer in the control room fell without incident, meaning all I need to do now is strip the escape van for a speedier escape. Alas, with my one joker's head stuck in a wall somewhere and 2 dozers on the map, this wasn't the simple job I was hoping it would be. With the protection of uppers and an FAK, I decided to face tank the slow-shooting Reinfeldt dozer before his mate joined in, which turned out to be a fatal mistake. Shot 1 took my armor, shot 2 my first aid, and shot 3 my life, falling just before I could pay for parking, one of the most ridiculous objective failures I've ever encountered. Worst thing about this is, if I'd just been running the suit, I would have surely armor-gated him, again leaving me questioning my build. This crushing defeat opened the floodgates to 2 more disappointing head loss moments, as to say I was crashing out would be understating the mindset. Remember, this is just the first Deathwish heist, and we're already on 16 failed attempts for what's debatably the easier portion of it. Up to 17 again, after a promising start, I required the good graces of the Payday gods to keep me moving forwards with feigned death, making it to the garage doors, where I was forced to use the ticket machine for the few pixels of cover it offers up against SWATs and a turret. I made it inside by the skin of my teeth, and after a few more close calls, including 2 more feigned death procs leaving me on grey screen, managed to wrangle a joker to fight for me. No more second chances at this stage, and completely out of saw ammo after the first several doors I guessed, a lengthy lockpick and dozer scramble led to one final sprint back to progress the van, this time stripping it before distracted cops reached me, clearing day 1 and moving the torment over to the FBI officers for the first time on this run. Second only to my 480 health Bronco Queen, the pistol-wielding FBI officers in this heist make for great recruits to clear a path through the early stages of the heist. Unfortunately, I wasted all 6 of my knives inside the skull of this dozer, who was about to wander out the map with them, leaving me defenseless. After confirming I could just rub up against him and pull them out, I also confirmed that point-blank shotgun blasts hurt quite a lot. Attempt 2 ended even earlier when an armoured heavy SWAT hit a "Get Down, Mr. President" and saved his high DPS buddy, dropping my tiny health bar far faster than expected. You see, I am running FAKs on this build because any sort of additional survivability feels essential, even when I'm only healing up a depleted health bar due to Anarchist's armor conversion mechanic. Yes, I just talked over that pathetic attempt 3 footage. Not much to say really, the early moments of this heist can and often will go sour, with the only redeeming factor being at least the pain is short and sharp. On attempt 4 I had no such luck. Instead it was a prolonged 11 minutes as the archives were invaded by a pair of charging school dozers who did enough damage to me in a drive-by to leave me on my last legs. On the next attempt, I wasted all my luck early on, using up 2 feigned death chances in the initial skirmish, before the third one activated 15 minutes in to keep me limping along. The shock of it was all too much though, as instead of just getting out of the control room for a minute and resetting, I hung out next to the power box, before looking up at the hulking brute in front of me, who gave me the old 1-2 combo to send me to custody, the more direct route. If skill wasn't getting me there, and luck wasn't enough either, I was running out of ideas. I stuck to it for attempts 6 and 8, which were punctuated by another early failure at the hands of the FBI, first going down to the surprising burst damage of the shotgun marshal, and then later to his shield-wielding counterpart, an enemy type who wasn't around 4 years ago to ruin my day during the initial no-shooting run. It's fair to say these guys have passively increased the difficulty of these challenges. 9 was spared a 14-minute long romp before the disappointment landed, again going down soon after entering the control room, but 10 went the distance. This time I took advantage of my good fortune, reviving me for a second chance early on, as I held out at a surprisingly peaceful ops room for most of the heist. Before I knew it, escape was available, and thanks to the power of Saw Massacre, a lesser used skill which allows me to spread panic through 50% of kills picked up with my Saw equipped, the path to victory was a lot less dangerous than anticipated, saving a keycard for a swift escape to the car park, and finally clearing heist and breakout after more than 25 setbacks. That's just a taste of what's to come though. On a more optimistic note, I do have Lust for Life now, making it much easier to focus on the armor-gating playstyle of Anarchist rather than just tanking up. Perfect timing to test out on the moderately challenging Heist and Revenge heist. I could now stand my ground and fight more often, especially when trading damage into groups, and of course being the spammiest option, the snowball fit the bill even better now. Unfortunately, I gained little to no survivability up against the armor-piercing snipers who are still lethal at this stage, trading not so well up against them. On attempt 2, Hector's panic room was down in the basement, meaning at the very least I wasn't tempted to look out the windows, although I was lucky to survive a nasty run-in with a dozer head on. Hector himself took a real pelting and was so disorientated by the snow in his eyes he was barely able to return fire, locking himself back in the panic room and sealing his fate. The only snipers left on the heist didn't have a great view of Biles' escape chopper, meaning I didn't need to play with fire whilst getting clear of this one. The diamond is next, and I actually have no idea what dropped me so quickly on attempt 1, but again a lack of crowd control was doing me no favours, and the cop's objective focus often baits me into playing far more aggressively than I have any right to. Attempt 2 nearly turned into another accidental stealth completion as I made it all the way to the second time lock inside the diamond exhibit in a full loud build until some guards stumbled upon the civ I'd left tied in the bushes. Still needing to do a shortened PC hack to override the lockdown, the entire dynamic and timing of this one was very different thanks to my stealthy head start. I was free to open up the exhibit and let the gas dissipate without too much bothering me, making it back to the courtyard for a simple enough clear. Golden Grin on the other hand can be a slog in loud, and I desperately need a reprieve, so fully committed to stealthing this one for a change of pace. I'm still just a little bit rusty and overzealous in my stealth movements though, leading to a nasty chain reaction after this guard got caught willingly donning his BDSM gear. Attempt 2 also hit a snag when again, I forgot just how good security's sixth sense is in this game. Visual detection hardly matters, I just lingered too close in this instance. Fortunately, attempt 3 was the one, getting into the security room after a few close calls, and admittedly forgetting to clear out the guys patrolling back there, which can lead to disaster. Fortunately, I ran back upstairs just in time to give this guy a vasectomy, preventing future generations of Golden Grin slip-ups, fingers crossed. This rescued the entire heist as I was able to secure the dentist's coffer without another incident. More stealth next, this time heading to the bomb dockyard, which has been a bogey heist for me in the past. Seeing as I don't want to deal with its devious sniper spawns, I kept things quiet, although wasn't able to salvage this situation despite my decent knife aim. Attempt 2 went a hell of a lot better though. In fact, it was so clean there's absolutely nothing to talk about. I'm going to give you your time back on this one so we can go into a little more detail on Scarface Mansion, another heist I'm determined to stealth this time around. Well, as promised, things are already going poorly as my aim went out the window the second I saw the head of security's dashing green coat. Honestly, trying my usual approach of methodically clearing out the pagerless guards outside wasn't the brightest move with only a knife in the holster. The odds of landing every shot before the guards suspected something was slim, and of course once they're alerted you always have the chance of them randomly shooting upon death, which is as ever a frustrating way to lose a stealth run. After 3 more messy chain reactions led to camera related restarts, all within the first few minutes of the heist, I realised something obvious. Just stop killing people, dude. Unless it's that guy in particular. The lesson of the day is that it's totally possible to just move around most of the external guards on this heist, especially with a bit of parkour. Once inside Scarface's titular mansion, I did start playing a little fast and loose with my knives, but I'd earned it, still carrying enough body bags to clean up my crimes after juggling some pages, making it up to Ernesto Sosa himself, and for once remembering to knife him before his health bar kicks in after he spots you. On the way out with his lovely drugs, I decided to clear a path forward, as once again, the Payday 2 AIs showcase the eyes in the back of their heads, with this guard somehow noticing an incident happening directly behind him. On the plus side, another Payday 2 quirk is that some guards have the reaction time of a sloth, deciding to stamp his cigarette out first before dealing with a murderous Jimmy crouched about 3 feet away. Never change, game. After that heart-in-mouth moment, with cams now down, I could finally take out the guards in between me and the escape boat without worry, clearing this heist in decent time. Crime sprees next. Yep, that was good. Another quick transport heist on the equivalent of overkill difficulty is not worth an extra word. Counterfeit, on the other hand, gives us that whiplash back to Death Wish difficulty, brought in the form of a proper bulldozing out of nowhere. You might notice some slightly hesitant movement from me in this gameplay, yet my wireless keyboard was in the process of breaking during this recording session, so don't judge too harshly. I don't need any excuses for the next attempt though, as I really breezed through it. Getting as far in stealth as possible makes a huge difference, and as long as the dozers are distracted by my jokers, I'm not in any great danger of getting one-shot. Without a single interruption, the escape welcomed me with open arms before the snipers I'd prepped for even had the chance to spawn in, and the sewer-dwelling dozers didn't even get a shot off as I cleared the first of the classics. First World Bank is up next, another stealth fodder heist for this run, sort of. Things started off great, no kills through the vault section, where I've learned my lesson and will rush down the camera operator immediately. This leaves me free to dispatch the 3 guards patrolling this section for a completely risk-free bag-moving experience. In a twist of fate though, on the way over to the escape, facilitated by the insider, I got caught completely off guard by this guy's swift 360, spotting me in front of a camera and forcing the heist loud. However, at this stage, I was basically out, so popped the C4 down and sprinted to the escape. We're gonna need to call a judge in for this one. Personally, I didn't see a single cop on this heist, so mostly for the sake of my sanity, I'm gonna soft call it a fair clear. I know my crew AI picked up a few kills on security, but just like on Car Shop, I don't believe they were pertinent to the result of the heist, so plan on letting this one slide. I'm ready to receive whatever judgment you guys deem appropriate in the comments though, but in the meantime, just consider it a bit of karmic retribution for the soul crushes I'd experienced earlier, and don't worry, everything comes out in the wash eventually. I won't be forced to repent just yet though, hitting up Murky Station for the usual sub 4 minute pacifist run I pride myself on. Boiling Point next, pretty much the perfect heist to ruin the day of a throwable only fella. Limited cover and open objectives, check. Wait, sorry, double check. Fixed dozer spawns, check. Turret spawns covering a key requirement, check. Numerous fixed sniper spawns that are so far out the odds of landing a snowball on them it's non-existent, and even if I was getting close, I wouldn't have a clue as the entire heist is white. That is a bingo. This heist is a nightmare, and getting so close to clearing it after just a couple of runs was crushing. 40 meters from victory is rough, but I had learned a few things. For instance, there really was no reason for me to face the dozers who stood in my way head on. Instead, I could just run them around the compound, throwing snowballs around cover to take them down gradually. Unfortunately, this RPK-wielding school dozer equivalent didn't take kindly to my schoolyard antics, and I did require a first feign death prog to keep things moving. This frightened me into action, just waiting till the end of the assault before I grabbed the server and launched the game into final charge mode. The first wave of scripted spawns I just wore on my chin, using the 2 seconds of anarchist invulnerability to glide on by as this dozer planted his feet and didn't bother pursuing. Out in the open snowfield though, all strategy went out of the window. I took a fresh joker to hopefully take some heat as I hid behind a tree, with the mindset of, if I can't see you, you can't see me. I also remembered I could just pepper my own joker to heal my armor up faster, a helpful tech, but not one that saved me from needing yet another clutch feign death activation to get over the line, just in time to drag me to the escape, where you can very clearly see the elation in my teabagging movements. That clear is a serious marker for me. A heist that looked insurmountable on paper, ascended by a combination of dumb luck and a few cheesy tactics. So of course, I had to celebrate over on Santa's workshop by slamming this first responder with a lethal melee strike, breaking the rules and forcing an immediate restart. On attempt 2, I kept my saw blade to myself, holding out long enough for the escape to arrive, but missed a couple of crucial knives which could have propped bullseye and saved me from an awkward point-blank death. Runs 3 and 4 didn't even make it that far, the first going horizontal quite literally at the hands of a Bronco double tap, and the second to a similarly powerful sniper shot out of the blue. When even Santa's workshop is taking over 30 minutes, you know you're in the mud, and once more attempt 5 wasn't even all that clean, requiring feign death again to get me back on my feet after failing to notice the few beat cops who'd stuck around from the start. I hung in there this time, making sure to avoid another sniper related incident, and fled for another heist in the bag. Back at the car shop, some 30 heists on, of course I was playing worse now than I was 40 hours ago. Failing attempt 1 by breaking a piece of glass, I imagine few players have ever noticed, let alone smashed for the instant alarm activation. On attempt 2, after initially salvaging things, I got into more trouble with my body bag placements, although this guy might have ended the heist, but who really got the last laugh? I have no idea how physics works in the Payday universe, but I truly believe that's for the best. As always seems to be the case though, the actually successful run was not in the least bit interesting, so let's move past the calm before the storm, directly into the dreaded biker heist. There's some history here for me. This was a roadblock on many of the early challenge runs, especially as my tactics hadn't yet evolved. Now I have a few tricks up my sleeve, although I'm still very much at the mercy of RNG, or in some cases just my own incompetence as I attempted to sidle up to a full wall of fresh spawns to take a joker like it was my god-given right. Humbled somewhat, and especially frustrated as I was in turn given the inferior mechanic spawn, I took things a little slower on attempt 2, where foolishly, by not switching over to the saw in time, I got myself tased and fired some damaging shots. Not necessarily a complete rule break as no one died, but I'm still going to honour the old no shooting me from all those years ago. This can't stand, and it was crap RNG anyway. One nice build adaptation at this stage, especially for when running snowballs, is the skill Unseen Strike. 6 seconds of easy to activate crit chance thanks to the snowball's minuscule backfire damage is a game changer, as crits are really my only way to handle the larger units. A couple of unnecessary downs midway through this heist, both at the hands of snipers, did admittedly throw me off my stride, before a third dropped me for good, even through the activation of my invulnerability. Still, the blueprints were there, I just needed to persist. Once again, sniper pressure took me down about 8 minutes into the next run, but luck was again on my side, not only through feigned death bringing me back, but also by the mechanic sending me to collect the chrome skull, the safest of the objectives I could roll once snipers start spawning. That in the bag, and after one final holdout in the shed where my snowball's knockback potential really saved the day, I made a run for the bike with full armor and health, ignoring the sniper onslaught and escaping this one after just a few setbacks. Day 2 is normally the easier of the days, although I ran right up against a soft lock on attempt 1, bringing throwing knives for some reason, which don't do enough damage to take the biker boss down, and like with the doses before her, can't be pulled out, leaving me 18,000 damage short. Not the brightest move I've ever made. I also wasted a ton of feigned death luck here, using up all 3 free revives for absolutely no reason, as I couldn't even convince a joker to fight by my side. Sadly, the alternative is snowballs, and they're not exactly prodigious in the damage category themselves, making the early section of this heist a lot harder than it needed to be. After getting steamrolled by standard SWAT early on, the panacea to all problems, as we know too well, is of course converted Joker cops, who finally took some heat off me, although didn't prevent me from getting shot out the sky for the second time on this run, needing another RNG revive to stay afloat. This enabled me to reach the biker boss at last for one of the least graceful showdowns you have ever seen. Pursued by a schooldozer who knocked me to my knees once more, this just got more and more messy. Resetting and surviving another nasty skirmish by the skin of my teeth, it took upwards of 100 bloody snowballs to finally lay the biker boss low, and that's with support from the SWATs fighting with me. After a grueling 7-minute struggle, bearing in mind the full throttle achievement requires you to do the entire heist in just 2, she was finally in the dirt, and I could simply sprint from one end of the train to the other uncontested, as I think the game assumed we'd ran out of train tracks. Not the heist I was expecting to be such a nerve-wracking marathon. That is sadly up next, as we don't get any respite this time around. Panic Room, my old nemesis. It's been far too long with this kind of rule set. To think, if it all ends here, I've learned nothing in the past 4 years. That wouldn't half be a depressing conclusion to this video. Roadblock number 1 was almost immediate, killing Chavez. The snowballs are pretty much a non-negotiable. Their addition is what makes the no-shooting run feasible, meaning we don't require ridiculously good aim or good fortune. Sadly, that means every single attempt opens with a brutal snowball fight with a bloke who's brought a pair of pistols to a bit of schoolyard fun. This time investment just adds to the jeopardy that comes later. Of course, once Chavez is down, we set up the saws and take jokers, which is the easy part. It's once we make it onto the roof, you remember just how thin the line between victory and defeat really is. We need to take out a total of 14 snipers, who can spawn out of nowhere on all surrounding buildings, and are just as likely to pop you off as you are them. I've been waiting for this moment for almost 4 years, studying Euclidean geometry since the day of my defeat and getting my angles in groove across the duration of this run, and now no sniper is safe. It was working. Until about 80% of the way through their ranks, I realised all that build-up was for nothing, because at the end of the day, in the blink of an eye, the bastards can undo all your grueling work without a moment's hesitation. A shattering setback to take, made even worse by the fact I had to chuck snowballs at Chavez again. Hell, after almost first timing this one, I didn't even make it up to Chavez on run 2, taken out by gangsters, not for the first time on this challenge. Attempt 3 made it back to the rooftop, but once again, a single missed throw was lethal as I traded with this sniper, giving me at least that satisfaction to carry into the 4th run back. This time, it was my refusal to take cover that sealed my fate, overestimating my entire health pool's ability to absorb a sniper shot after forgetting that my armor bar had stolen most of it. The following run didn't make it past the gangsters again, which brings us on to attempt 6. After refining my Chavez strategy, which basically consisted of proccing unseen strike constantly and abusing his slow AI, I was back on the roof. Here, well, let's count them, for the yell wonk of yesteryear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Amidst these white puffs of triumph, I went down once for the crime of shield surfing, needing feign death to again save the day, before finding myself body blocked into oblivion and on death's door once more, but this time saved by a combination of anarchist and first aid, making it past the greatest hurdle this entire series has ever encountered. Although, that isn't job done. There's still plenty of opportunities for this to fall apart. Not least this moment, where I just couldn't get off the roof and came round after being flashbanged without even realising I'd used up another feign death activation until much later. Planting the C4 was a nightmare, especially on the roof, where I just couldn't force it as the cops weren't properly dispersing at the end of assaults, and martial snipers put far too much pressure on my armour to rely on a die-hard rush. Instead, I stayed on the lower floors, hoping it would draw the cops away from the objective, which it successfully did after about 10 minutes messing around, allowing me to set up the final 2 charges at the same time. I've learned since the initial run that all you need to do at this stage is survive the assault and Bile will lower the magnet, which was also a nerve-wracking event, completely out of FAKs at this stage and in very real danger of being dozed to oblivion whilst interacting. Once tied up, the timing was perfect though, hardly needed to wait for the end of another assault wave as the escape opened up for a 192 kill, 33 minute long heist, a marathon run befitting the occasion. But we can't celebrate too early now. Brooklyn 1010 offers a similar sniper heavy challenge, which the snowballs also partially solve. Raining icy death from above on the beat cops isn't all that tricky, meaning the first section of this heist went without a hitch. It was the apartment snipers who really gave me the conniptions. The hitboxes on these guys are really wonky. I'm pretty sure there's some sort of collision issue with the buildings they're stood in, because it felt like most of my lob snowballs were disappearing into the ether, again requiring me to land pinpoint direct hits to take these guys out. In the absence of any dozer spawns though, this was more of a test of my patience than anything else, just requiring me to loop around the building when things got too hot to mess with the cops' pathing, taking out the final roadblock and instantly ziplining down towards the escape. On previous runs, if I didn't fail at the cage section, the escape normally put me in my place, but without a turret spawn covering this side of the courtyard, I was free to wait it out, away from the most prolific spawn locations, whilst my jokers tanked up all the aggro from the dozers. This is a hell of a lot safer than running into the escape zone, leaving Sharon to defend for himself before making a break to move the cop cars as soon as the opportunity arose. With the dozers straight up ignoring me, this was somehow a free lunch, escaping for a first time clear. Not a result I would have gambled on, seeing as I always saw this heist as heir apparent to Panic Room in terms of potential Yelwonk torture. The yacht heist on the other hand is a pretty safe bet. You can get away with 3 major cock-ups on this one, alerting half the boat staff and even using more than your expected share of pages and still escape in stealth without too many issues. I know it looked like I was going for blood in the water, but honestly I wasn't. Undercover is another of those mid-tier difficulty heists that can waste a little time but never feels insurmountable, especially with another of those rare 480 health Bronco lasses at my side. She ended this heist with almost as many kills as I had and hard carried most of the interrogation section. As for the escape, here's where things could have gone either way as I attempted to use my 2-second window to tank up the snipers covering my exit, but got the timing terribly wrong and needed another clutch feign death activation to make it to the landing zone. I'm not sure my heart could have taken yet another loss that deep into a lengthy heist, but it damn well better be hardened up against potential sadness before embarking on Slaughterhouse, one of the most innately challenging heists in the entire run, pretty much regardless of the rule set. The prospect of moving 8 heavy bags of gold through a wide open courtyard covered by upwards of 5 coded in sniper spawns is frankly chilling. The plan was to give those snipers the panic room treatment with snowballs, but that left me running away from fixed dozer spawns for the first 10 minutes of run 1 without the DPS to really deal with them. Eventually I cracked and decided to just abuse their piss poor turning circles, but not before I'd already used up one of my 9 lives. In the end, the dozers just kept pressuring me too consistently to have a pot shot at the snipers, resulting in me testing their aim, an examination they passed with flying colours. I'm not actually sure what the trigger is for snipers spawning on this one, or I'd probably have a better chance of moving all the loot in one go. Although they didn't even get a chance to ruin attempt 2, which also made it past the 10-minute mark, albeit with more aid from feigned death, before my aim deserted me, and you can see how quickly a single mistake snowballs, pardon the pun, into a down. Something as simple as a pork chop catching 1 or 2 knives can be the difference between a clean run and ending up fried yourself on the other end of a stun gun. I'm pretty sure I still have shotproof here, so no idea what went wrong. You'll notice me switching between knives and snowballs in this gameplay as I flip-flop in my head between what unit types are causing all my problems. Switch to snowballs and I get slapped all over the place by regular units and dozers. Repeatedly. Sorry, make that 3 times in a row. Those cop melee strikes really are missing from Payday 3 and can catch us properly off guard. What's even crazier, on one of these runs, a school dozer carrying chopper arrived within the first 30 seconds of the heist. I don't think I've ever seen this RNG variation after what must be hundreds of Slaughterhouse attempts over the years. Payday 2 still hiding surprises from me is why I keep playing it all these years later. Sometimes though, it just doesn't matter what you do or how you play. The game giveth, and the game taketh away. Up against a steadily advancing duo of minigun dozers inside the Slaughterhouse, with an army of snipers and a SWAT van turret just outside, you might have a little sympathy for me just throwing my life away here 14 minutes into attempt 7. The switch back to a throwing knife build gave me a sliver of hope of at least making it back out to the shipping containers, before going down pretty meekly just a few seconds after tasting that fresh air again. Adapting to shut this particular spawn entrance did give me a tiny bit more room to operate on run 9, but despite having an easier time getting back out of the corridor of doom, I still only had it in me to secure 2 bags before a school dozer charged and dismissively wiped me off the map. It's the way he did it that really got to me. I was not posing even a threat to the prospect of completing this heist. I think 3 bags was the working record, so instead of burning myself out by ramming my head into it, I made the executive call to use up the first of my 3 lifelines. Crew AI gives me access to a totally unmodified crew of lads to help me out. No custom weapons, no skills or buffs, just pure Amcar goodness. I've actually gone to this lifeline on this exact heist before, so I knew what to expect. Joined by Jacket, Dragon and Bonnie, whilst also facing down an increased spawn cap, we ran it back. The first thing I did with 3 bodyguards at my side was drop the genset van on my own head, which I did well to survive all things considered. Whilst the full team of 3 could barely keep up with my nice spree kill count, the boys weren't here for their lethality. They were here to carry bags of gold and occasionally peel me off the floor when the going got too tough. In the end, just their presence was enough to keep the snipers distracted as I kept advancing the heist, pushing towards what will always feel like a bit of a cop-out victory, but still one that was hard fought. I can't deny, Slaughterhouse is one of the most challenging heists in the game, and I was lucky to make it all the way through, even with a lifeline used, quite literally stumbling over the finish line. The pain starts coming, and it don't stop coming though, as Locke enters the picture and immediately tells us to go rob a top secret mercenary base without a second thought. Unfortunately, I am having second thoughts as I just about survived a mad scramble whilst not out of the heist intro section. Opening the vaults and securing the loot wasn't really the issue, that was securing it back out on the Thunderbird's roof, running into the low ground sniper spawn RNG who were on point dropping me almost straight out of the gates. I was able to reset once thanks to Messiah, giving me a more reliable form of self-revive, but with too many lasers trained on my head, this was only ending one way. The only thing more crushing than a late game battering like that is failing to even make it half as far on the next run. The RNG to get inside the compound was absolutely brutal here, as I was down 3 times in total and wasn't quite fast enough in hitting the spacebar to give that 4th life a chance. I made it marginally further on attempt 3, but after wasting Messiah early on, was at the complete mercy of the fixed spawns heading into the control room. That first run was rapidly starting to look like a fluke, as I could barely get the gates open on attempt 4. Let me tell you, this isn't normally a difficult heist. Every mission at the moment feels like its own individual challenge run for this setup. I just don't have enough tools at my disposal to clear groups, and taking it slowly isn't an option either with limited resources. Time and time again, the results were getting worse. It wasn't until run 6 that I actually made it back to the roof of the compound, this time avoiding the worst of the sniper spawns and managing to take out the others up in the hills with a bit of persistence. You see, finally, after all this time, I think it's actually a no-brainer to run the Ordnance bag. This enables me to happily run a limited capacity throwable such as the Shuriken, which also has an easier to read trajectory and still one-shots basically all enemy types barring dozers, who can still be bled out with a bit of persistence. Yes, I lose the free hits Uppers usually provides, but I gain a substantial amount of damage, deal that damage over time, which makes Anarchist even stronger, and gain access to the occasional posthumous kill, ideal for Messiah. Speaking of which, you might notice that's currently down. You might have also spotted the medic bag charges on the map. Funny that. I hope those unrelated facts don't become relevant imminently. Nah, I am safe. I can literally just hide in this bush whilst refueling the chopper. The dozers in this game are idiots. He's distracted, I'm camouflaged or something. There's no way he's gonna loop around and that's brutal. A true keyboard smasher. No wonder my keys weren't functioning properly earlier. Yet again, a tough heist ends in disaster just seconds and meters from victory. At least I had the blueprint down at this stage and can take that knowledge into future runs. Oh god damn it. I was just playing on tilt at this stage. The possibility of another lifeline usage wasn't out of the question, but I think that would have been foolhardy with so many tougher heists still yet to come. Instead, I just buckled in, making it inside the compound properly again thanks to Messiah, which I actually remembered to replenish this time, meaning I had it in my back pocket once more after a sniper took me down on the roof. By maximising my Ordnance bag usages, I could basically just stumble across more Shuriken no matter how bad my aim degraded, keeping the cops and, most importantly, the snipers at bay long enough to load into the chopper, uncontested this time. The writing was on the wall though. The heists only get harder from here, so I'm going to need to bring my A game to Birth of Sky. At least with Anarchist, you can pretty much guarantee you won't get shot out of the sky without being able to respond, which is a nicer boon to have than it should be. Unfortunately, attempt 1 was struck by that almost unassailable double minigun dozer spawn RNG that stung me in the past. Attempt 2 on the other hand really limped its way far further than it had any right to. Feign-Death refused to release me from this mortal coil, and eventually, after realising I'd used up all my Shuriken into a single dozer who wasn't taking any more damage, I caved in and dropped the Ordnance bag, giving me the throwable surplus to crack the third money pallet and make it down into the sewers. Unfortunately, after getting flushed out once, I just didn't have enough juice to charge directly into 3 Skulldozer spawns and get the second gate to the dinghy open, falling at the final hurdle as I have so many times before. Getting a chance to charge into near certain death wasn't even a luxury I was afforded all that often, with attempt 3 going astray very suddenly when, you guessed it, the snipers decided to team up with tasers to ruin my life. Whilst the final straw for me was on attempt 4, when I got the manhole cover to the sewers open, only to be sniped on my way down, being greeted by a dozer who wasn't kind enough to lend me a Messiah activation. I was so close to pulling the trigger on drop difficulty here, but instead took a small break and came to it later that day. This is why you should always give decisions made in anger a little time to rattle around in your brain first. The key was just not worrying about the escape too much. That one was in RNG's hands. Better to concentrate on the things I can actually impact, meaning I switched back over to the snowballs and focused up. This was almost a flawless money pallet section until I missed a jump at a crucial moment and needed to get incredibly lucky with a couple of crit snowballs to win back a second chance. This one chance was all I needed though. Despite again running into the motherload of Skulldozer spawns, Anarchist has enough damage negation in its kit to break through the dozers head on, abusing their AI quirks to get the thermite placed before rising from the dead and hiding where they couldn't follow. I took the rest of the journey on foot, getting scarily close to going down to just a few regular mercs before clearing this massive roadblock without as much struggle as I was growing accustomed to. Heat Street isn't normally as difficult, especially once you get around the first bend, although that's easier said than done. I went down to just the beat cops on 3 initial attempts, making the mistake of not committing to a proper strategy, before I decided it was time to take a hostage early, and then just bloody well leg it to safety. The gung-ho approach worked quite nicely before only needing a couple of canisters of fuel to get Matt roasting, and soon after moving up the street. These cross-map shuriken are somehow even more satisfying than the snowballs, as it seems some of that no-shooting run muscle memory never left me. It might not mean a lot to you, but the little win of completing an entire heist without going down even once is a massive boost to my confidence after relying on nothing but the most mature of cheese strats on this run. I'm not stupid enough to expect the same from Green Bridge though. This heist suffers from that exact same issue Heat Street has in its first 30 seconds. All the cops on the bridge hit like a truck and don't miss, so you can expect a few of these, all things considered. Whilst the switch over to Ordnance Shuriken has served me well thus far, having such sluggish healing options up against the initial cops felt like a death sentence. As a result, I switched back to snowballs to get past the tricky opening moments of this heist. Finding the prisoner early was also a massive step towards victory, as he pathed kindly to avoid most of the open ground that left me wide open to getting sniped. Up at the top of the scaffolding, things are always hectic. My inability to either deal with the SWAT chopper or surrounding snipers was an ever-present reminder of the weaknesses of this build, although a basic SWAT turned this corner like a lost duckling to present me with a cherished opportunity to get back on my feet via Messiah. Sadly, every time the cops messed with the balloon, I had to present myself to the goon squad up top, and again, my life was left in the game's hands. But once more, Payday 2's Caesar gave me a thumbs up, only to snatch that moment of relief away right at the escape as I waited out my immunity cooldown, only to be pursued by a conga line of cops, including the schooldozer from earlier, who were far closer than I anticipated. Grabbing defeat from the jaws of victory again gave me a crisis of build faith, flip-flopping back to the shuriken setup, resulting in another couple of very short-lived attempts. If I could get past the soaring section though, I felt that this build had every chance, and after throwing the entire kitchen sink at this sniper, I might have just opened up a path to that situation. It wasn't the same clean escort mission this time, but even so, the game refused to let me die. Again, I was forced into using up that final Messiah charge whilst holding out on the scaffolding, which left me completely exposed for the escape, but first I needed to head back and pick up some shuriken to even be in with a chance, which left me wide open to getting blindsided by a sniper for the 3rd time on this single attempt. I was at least getting somewhere, progressing to the escape again shortly after, this time with the snowball build, but once more being completely run over by the fixed dozer spawns, who will always wipe my armor with little more than a glance. That's conditioned behaviour as I ran at them quickly after being pursued a couple of attempts ago. This was enough punishment at the escape to call upon yet another lifeline, the most boring of the 3 drop difficulty, enabling me to play this heist on Mayhem instead of Deathwish, just the once. I'm still massively pressured on this difficulty, but that's just the open nature of Green Bridge. It was incredibly clear that the passive damage reduction was enough to make Anarchist luck almost impenetrable, whilst also lobotomizing one of the skulldozers at the escape, giving me just enough juice to make it past their onslaught and down the side of the bridge. With only 1 lifeline remaining, Alaskan Deal is the next roadblock on our journey to the White House. I'm not going to beat around the bush on this one. This heist is easy, but for this build, it was a living nightmare. The first 3 attempts with shuriken didn't make it to the pump section, failing before I even freed the ship's captain. I made it a little further on attempt 4 thanks to the snowball switch, but the knock-on effect of that was having no damage to clear a path and still getting incessantly sniped from one of 3 locations. After the least successful attempt so far hit the deck almost as soon as Locke sprung the ambush, number 6 finally went somewhere. Through a combination of grit, determination, and a healthy dose of Messiah, I made it past the pump section, which is so much harder these days as the cops actually persistently path to interrupt it, giving low DPS builds even more to worry about. After almost 15 minutes, I was finally on board a fully fueled ship and ready to depart, although the timing could not have been more abhorrent. A slew of SWATs and dozers flooded aboard, and I was out for the count without a chance of catching my trip out of there. Getting so close, so many times, does something to a man. I was playing beyond tilt at this stage. I decided that it was the dozers causing my life's problems, but in switching to the throwing knife again, left myself wide open to the real issues, the snipers. Again and again, I wasn't even making it past the hostage situation, and then when I did limp my way there, I was a sitting duck for sniper 2-shots, or still simply unable to out-DPS the skulldozers terrorizing this portion of the run. It should be clear to any observer that the snowball setup does simply give me a higher chance of moving later into this heist, but it's hard to see that with clarity whilst you're the one playing it, again only making it back to the fueling section once I change my build back. The problem is, there's a real hopelessness you feel whilst armed with only snowballs, which makes any failure feel extra frustrating. And let me tell you, these failures were coming thick and fast at this stage, none less irritating than the last. At this point, I made a massive sanity call, which was in hindsight an emotional one that turned out to be a mistake. I called on my final lifeline, Rule Breaker. This is the most versatile lifeline I have at my disposal, allowing me to extend the rule set for a single heist to break the back of a particularly egregious issue I'm having. After nearly wasting the one chance I had early on, you can now see what the rule I chose to break was. For the first and only time on this challenge, I am allowed to shoot my pistol, but only at the snipers on this map. Meaning, for the most part, I'm still just scrambling around the floor, trying to get enough powder to lob at my enemies. If only they regenerated quicker on a heist that's actually snowing. This one small tweak in the rules was enough to make it on board once more, and probably feeling sorry for me, this ship just pulled away with half an army on board, going into Swansong just long enough to prolong my life and make it out. For anyone counting, that's it. My final lifeline spent, I'm on my own from here on in. On the plus side, the classic diamond heist is up next, a stealth interlude to break up my loud suffering. After making it inside the vault and clearing a path to the loot lift, this one was just a matter of patience, finally granting me a reprieve with a first time clear. Day 2, the actual first day we play of Reservoir Dogs, was also a nice confidence builder, enabling me to head into the precursor day high on confidence. A confidence that was shattered within a minute, dropped by the ambush and teased by this shield who wouldn't give me a chance to revive. On attempt 2, my throwing knife setup finally earned its selection, breaking the initial ambush at the lifts and just about giving me enough firepower to open the rear of the store without ever grabbing a hostage. Again, the amount of luck required for me to even make it this far was off the charts. 3 consecutive feign death procs and then a Messiah self-revive just to progress towards an even more challenging section of the heist. I was dropped for a 5th time on the staircase, with the cops this time sensibly retreating, leaving me with no fodder to revive from. Just being forced to relive that ambush was wearing me down far quicker than attempt failures normally do. Again, the odds of making out the lift section alive felt slim to none. Probably in the region of a 10% chance, which took a nosedive every time the security system hack forced me to cross over to the front lobby. Not for the first time, a taser actually caused my downfall on attempt 6. Just breaking through the ambush was costing me my most crucial resources, and the worst part was that it could always get worse. For all those terrifying skulldozer charges, there was 1 or 2 runs waiting for me with turrets and snipers trained on my head. After falling for an 8th time, something finally changed. Instead of getting the initial elevator ambush, I was finally gifted the roadside breach. This might not mean much to you guys, but the timing changed almost everything, as only 1 dozer enters with this variation. I was able to focus him down quickly, even with snowballs equipped, giving me a much better chance of setting up and being ready for the follow-up assaults. The staggering of the skulldozer spawns gave me a chance, and with Feign Death doing everything in its power to not allow me to throw that opportunity away, I finally reached the point where I could breach the vault. But you see, that came with its own problems too, namely the entire gaggle of extra doses inside, as if I didn't already have enough on the map to deal with. You see, fixed spawns in Payday 2, unlike the sequel, do actually activate, even if it will push you over the spawn limit, which on Death Wish is 2. So yeah, I was backed into a corner with 4 doses wandering the heist, which is when I found a safe haven. I don't think I've ever used these lift shafts on this heist. I had no idea they even linked back around to the floor below, but whilst in here, the cop AI didn't seem to have a clue what to do, sending up the occasional lad to check things out who either pelted or converted to my side. This meant I could effectively wait out the assault waves before doing all my loot moving between spurts of anarchist and vulnerability, securing the first bags a whopping 18 minutes into the heist, before returning to my little hobbit hole to wait out the next assault. The problem was, the fixed dozer spawns didn't seem to be programmed to leave the heist between waves, meaning they acted as dangerous sentries, blocking me from truly using those brief reprieves to get anything done. Also, I have no idea why the cops started sinking into the floor, but it was probably a sign this heist didn't expect anyone to play it like this or stick around for so long. At the start of the next assault, I used up my final first aid kit, meaning no more second chances, before also use up my final life and Messiah charge with it. The great mistake I'd made was not remembering to place assets, leaving me on a knife edge. If I'm going to get this done, it needs to be here and now, as it seems the cops are finally wrapping their heads around my lift strategy, firing up at me as I teetered on the brink. This was a double-edged sword though, as it also allowed me to finally take out one of the pursuing skulldozers, meaning I had every chance of at least securing the loot during the lull that was upon me. Genuinely, I was shaking at this point. You can see evidence of that as I fumbled this final bag throw. This was it. Freedom. On grey screen, I simply needed to drop the C4, which would be entirely dependent on the resistance at the choke point, which for this RNG was fierce. As I threw one final snowball, the writing was on the wall. 30 minutes into the heist, I was simply out of gas, taken down once more and placed directly into custody. Looking back at it now, there are things I would change about how I played. Forgetting assets was a nightmare, but I also got incredibly lucky with my feigned death activations, so can't really blame it on that. Here's the real kicker though. Had I made it through, on closer inspection of the footage, my victory would have been disqualified by this moment on the staircase. I was so focused on the taser at the time that I didn't notice it, but this bloke decided to nestle up to get an impromptu haircut from my saw, which did make an appearance in my post-heist stats. But as you can probably tell, that really is it, the end of this torture. I will be forever stuck in a time paradox, having cleared the chronological second day, whilst never actually making it there in the first place. Spooky stuff. Whilst I'm gutted to have to throw in the towel here, I actually think it's pretty important that I do so. This run was brutal and had frankly gone beyond the point of being a fun challenge for me. I'm bad at knowing when to stop, so I'm pleased I drew the line here. I know I could have probably done more, remembered assets, and maybe tried something like Jack of all trades for additional healing, but I also think it's about time the Payday 2 challenge run format I drew up regained some respect. This is a bloody tricky endeavour, and many of the themed TF2 runs have been a relative breeze, which was starting to devalue what it meant to succeed in one. The game should claim some scalps from time to time, and for my part, I'm quietly happy with my performance. I think I came up with some innovative solutions to tricky problems, finally got my revenge on Panic Room after all these years, and really did fight tooth and nail to get the run finished. I believe this is the first time I've used all lifelines and still been stopped in my tracks. It was scrappy, and I got much closer than I first anticipated when embarking on this challenge. In all, this has definitely been the most difficult rule set I've ever contended with, as well as the most time-consuming run. For once, I'm not going to recommend you go out and try and replicate it. For your sake, if you do want to prove this is doable, I'd love it if people just attempted Reservoir Dogs and maybe Henry's Rock with only throwables and sent your footage my way, successful or otherwise. Had I made it past this roadblock, I believe Henry's Rock might have been almost as hard, although every other remaining heist is either stealthable or historically hasn't been that difficult. Sadly though, for challenge run builds to be successful, you really need a method of dealing with snipers, dozers and regular cops, and this run could only ever handle 2 at a time. Hence why if you added melee into the equation, you would probably be in with a shot. In total, for anyone wondering, I failed or restarted 165 times. That is a record by a massive margin, without even getting to the last 7 heists. So no, I don't think I'm throwing the towel in too early. Although, I will be keeping this save file just in case that urge takes over once more. Regardless, up until the very end, the challenge has been a blast to record. It's taken me right back to my roots and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to leave a like, let me know what challenge rule sets you'd like to see me take on in the future, and if you have a moment, check out my range of gaming machines over at Apex Gaming PCs for some sweet February deals. Take care, have a great week, and I'll see you all very soon. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.